So as Patty Hovell said, tonight we're talking about college and career-ready IEPs, and specifically our presentation is on IEP Foundations, College and Career Ready. So the IEP process is about who the team members are, how they interact with each other, and how they make decisions, and then how they actually come to agreement about a child's education program. So one of the handouts that you received tonight was the I-4 form. So I want you to make sure you find this as one of your handouts, because as we talk through this presentation here, we're actually gonna talk about different pieces of the I-4 form and the process that we follow. So our objectives are pretty basic here. Number one, we're going to talk about the 5 beliefs when we talk about college and career ready IEPs. We're going to talk and define the 5-step process in the IEP process. I don't know about you, but in all the years that I sat through IEPs with my at one time 3 of my 4 children, but eventually it was just down to 1 by the time we got to middle school and high school. I know it felt like the same type of process, and sometimes it just seemed like a conversation, and actually I never really understood until the steps were more well defined in my job, that I realized that there were multiple steps along the way that school teams actually follow. And so we're going to talk about that. And then finally, item number 3, we're going to talk about preparation for the IEP meeting. So what you see behind me here is the culturally responsive practice wheel. This is from the Department of Public Instruction, and this model to inform cultural responsive practices is actually something that we use in school districts around the state use in order to provide a framework for educators to learn, to apply knowledge, and to stand up to support the unique identity of each student. There is a link here, and we'll make the PowerPoint slides and all the handouts available to you, so you could actually go out here and go to the DPI website to learn more about this. Being culturally responsive is one of the CCR IEP 5 beliefs. IEP teams know and respect the unique identity of the student and explore programs, practices, procedures, and policies that meet the diversity of the student's abilities, race, gender, language, and culture. We know that every student is unique, and for educators to best support students, we have to reach out to learn about each and every student's unique identity. So really this speaks to not necessarily teaching the same way to every student, but actually taking into consideration the unique needs of each student and customizing and making sure that we're providing accommodations and supports that provide that student what they need in order to access education and to make progress. All right, so we have some DPI language here. You'll see the term RDA. RDA stands for Results Driven Accountability. And in the state of Wisconsin, we actually have turned Results Driven Accountability to Reading Drives Achievement. Success through literacy. So there's a video on here in regard to Reading Drives Achievement and why the focus of our IEPs now. I don't know if you noticed it as parents, but every IEP now has to address reading and or literacy, depending upon the age of the student. So if the student is reading at grade level, in the present level, where we talk about where the student is right now, how well are they reading, how well are they doing math, how well are they functioning in the classroom. In that present level, there needs to be a statement in there addressing reading. So if the student is reading on grade level, we expect to see a statement there and identifying where that student is reading. Many of our students that have IEPs struggle in reading, right? How many of you have a child that struggles in reading, right? Most of us do. My children all had reading goals. And so we need to see in the present level as well as in the goals and the supports, we need to talk about reading and where the student is performing at and what we're going to do to bring the student's reading level up to where it needs to be. So we also have CCR-IEP. So CCR IEP stands for College and Career Ready IEPs. CCR IEPs are for all students in public school programs ages 3 through 21. Now some families, when they hear College and Career Ready, they're thinking, oh, this is for middle school or high school students. It isn't. DPI believes, and so do I, because I've worked with families for so many years, is we have to start thinking about our children, even when they're real little, that someday they're going to be adults, living in the community, maybe going to college, maybe working, maybe volunteering. And what we do now is going to continue to help our child grow and develop to become an adult one day. So DPI was very specific, in particular about making sure that CCR IEPs, College and Career Ready, was part of the IEP name, okay? The CCR IEPs are not intended only for high school students. Rather, CCR IEPs build knowledge, skills, and habits. Knowledge, skills, and habits throughout students' academic experiences so that when they graduate, they are college and career ready. And I would also say community ready, because some of our kids, maybe because of their disability, may not be college or career bound, but they certainly need to be community ready to be able to live in the community with everybody else. An individualized education program, IEP, developed to meet the unique disability-related needs of the student and to help ensure the student graduates for further education and the workplace. So with that being said, I'd like you to listen in. I'm going to show a video in regard to the College and Career Ready IEPs.
Every year, families and educators of students with disabilities, students like Liam, get together to plan individualized education programs, or IEPs, in order to help each student succeed in school, and later in college, career, and life in the community. We recommend a 5-step process for developing a college and career-ready IEP. The first step is to make sure everyone understands how the student is doing, academically and otherwise. Liam's IEP team gathers data, information about his academic and functional skills, compared to the standards and expectations for all students in his grade. They note his strengths and his passions. This is great information that will help the team later plan services that support Liam's goals. Based on the information shared, the team is concerned Liam is not meeting all the grade level standards when it comes to reading. So what's next? A rich, open discussion to discover Liam's disability-related needs. The second step in developing a college and career-ready IEP is asking how Liam's disability affects his access to instruction, engagement, and progress in school, and why he is not achieving some of the grade level standards in reading. The team begins by sharing what they've observed. Liam's teacher has noticed, during small group instruction, that Liam has difficulty answering questions after reading grade level text. Liam's dad is concerned because he sees Liam losing confidence in his ability to read, and Liam agrees that's true. Now the team digs deep into why Liam is struggling in reading. They want to identify the root causes of his challenges. His teacher has observed Liam struggles to identify key ideas and details in what he reads. Maybe that makes him frustrated, so he goes off task. But why does he have this difficulty? The reading specialist has worked with Liam. She says he's mastered many foundational reading skills, but on the skill of decoding, like sounding out words, he is more than a year behind the benchmark for his grade. It's hard to read fluently and understand the ideas in a text if you're having to stop to sound out too many words. Could this decoding challenge be the root cause of Liam's reading struggles and his off-task behavior? The IEP team agrees that it is. So now they can move on to step 3, addressing Liam's disability-related needs and supporting his unique strengths by developing ambitious yet achievable goals. They develop a goal for him to increase competency in decoding words, and a goal to read text accurately, quickly, and with expression. Achieving these goals will help Liam identify the main idea and supporting details in grade-level materials, help him have greater confidence while reading, and reduce his off-task behaviors, all of which are ultimately goals for Liam. With the goals set, it's time for step 4, aligning special education services to support Liam with his goals. Everybody on the team discusses how they might contribute. Liam's teacher knows just the book that will engage him while he learns to decode more words. Because the general education reading instruction alone has not been successful in meeting Liam's needs, the IEP team determines that he also needs some specially designed instruction in reading. The reading specialist and the special education teacher will work together to figure out the best strategies to help Liam decode words. While Liam is working to increase his decoding and fluency skills, all his teachers will make sure he gets certain accommodations in the general education classroom, where he can continue to engage with his peers, accessing the same rich content and curriculum that they are, and engaging in the same thinking strategies. Some accommodations in Liam's IEP will even be made available to the whole class, such as text-to-speech on student laptops. Liam is excited about this plan. The team writes down today's discussion in his IEP so everyone knows the plan. They adjourn for the day, but Liam's team will continually monitor his progress, reviewing and revising his IEP as needed to help him stay on track to meet his goals. That's step 5 of College and Career Ready IEP development. And then the process begins again. Developing college and career ready IEPs from when a student is first identified for special education, whether in preschool or high school, all the way through graduation, is how to close achievement gaps and provide additional opportunities for student learning. It's how to help students with disabilities graduate ready for college, career, and life in the community. For help with the 5-step process, there are sample IEP forms schools can use, and more resources, such as 5 research-based beliefs that underlie the 5-step process, available on the College and Career Ready IEPs page at the Department of Public Instruction website.
All right. So that's the College and Career Ready IEPs in a nutshell in 5 minutes. Okay, so what I'd like to do right now is actually go into the College and Career Ready. Oh, I forgot to. There. Okay, now it'll work. Okay, so let's go into the College and Career Ready IEPs. So if all of you have a blue parent record file folder, if you would please go to the section, the tab that says Individualized Education Program. And in there, you're gonna see a blue brochure that looks like this. And just pull this out. It says College and Career Ready IEPs. So this will be a really handy dandy resource for all of you as we're going through our discussion here. And then, like I said, the I-4 form, the IEP form, we'll use that. And right now we're going to talk about the College and Career Ready IEPs. So one of the handouts you received today is like a blown up handout of the IEP teams know and explore using the CCR IEP 5 beliefs. So on the screen here, you'll see the 5 beliefs. And so number 1, we've got high expectations. So IEP teams know high expectations influence academic achievement and post-secondary independence, and explore a shared vision of high expectations for college, career, and community readiness. So everyone around the IEP table ought to have high expectations for our children. Number two, the culturally responsive practices. So that's where IEP teams know and respect the unique identity of the student and look to explore programs and practices and policies and procedures that meet the diversity of the students. Number three, this one's really important, student relationships. We know that students that have strong relationships in school typically go to school more often, attendance is better, they'll graduate from high school, they're more driven, more connected. So those student relationships, not only are we talking about student to student, and it's important to have those relationships among students, but we're also talking student to adult. So the teachers and the student relationship is really, really important as well. Number four, the family and community engagement. So DPI, when they redefined the IEP process, they really felt it was really important that we stress that engaging and working with families was key to helping students succeed and to close that achievement gap. So that has become one of the 5 beliefs that have been brought forward by the Department of Public Instruction. And also you'll see on our IEP forms, we actually have a new prompt. I hope many of you have seen it, the family engagement prompt, where the IEP team needs to identify how they're going to engage the family in their child's education. We are the only state in the nation that has that asks the question on an IEP form about how we're going to engage the family, because it's not required by the federal government. It's something that was added here in the state of Wisconsin. And then number 5, collective responsibility. What does that mean? It means everybody is responsible for helping our child succeed. It's not just because our child happens to have an IEP and it's the special ed teacher or speech and language path or someone in that department who's responsible for helping our child learn to read and learn. It's actually everybody's responsibility in the school, as well as the family's responsibility as part of the IEP team. Okay. So, and you'll see the 5 beliefs again are expressed and are outlined in the brochure as well. Any questions about the 5 beliefs? Okay. So the next thing we're going to just chat about a little bit, and I'm introducing you to that 5-step process that was reflected in the video we just watched. So the 5-step process, step 1 is understanding achievement, so that's writing that present level. Step 2, identifying the effects of the disability. Step 3 is to develop goals. Step 4 is to align services, and step 5 is to analyze progress, and then you start all over again, okay? So we should always start at the beginning, and we should never, ever be saying, the student, we need to find a way and a reason for why the student needs 30 minutes of reading instruction. We actually need to start at the beginning and say, the student is struggling in reading. Why is the student struggling in reading? We have to build the case, so to say, okay? So we always have to start at the beginning, where we're talking about where the student is at performing, both academically and functional performance, and then moving it along from there. All right, so here's step 1. And step 1 is understanding achievement. So, what's really nice on our IEP forms is our IEP forms do a nice job of outlining the expectations in each section. So as we're sitting down with the IEP team, you'll see boxes, such as on the one on page 1, where it says information about the student, including present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. So there's always a description of what goes in that area. And what's really nice with these, and I hope you notice this too, that the bolded area in that text box talks about families, right? That is a change in our IEP forms when they changed it and went to those 5 beliefs. And remember, family and community engagement is the 4th belief. You'll see that there are a number of places in the IEP that emphasize the importance of parents as IEP members and are encouraged to share information throughout the process. Okay. So in this section, we really try to focus on what the strengths of the student are, okay? So we want to talk about student strengths and interests first. So these include how the child is performing in school, at school and outside of school, both academically, math, reading, language, written language skills, communication skills, social skills, and interests. So why do we want to identify strengths and interests? Because sometimes those strengths and interests can be used as a way to address some of the challenges our children have. So for instance, if our child struggles in reading and loves reading about sea animals, whales, sharks, things like that, in order to engage them and get them excited about reading, we're going to look at sea animal books and different types of information that might engage them because they have a special interest in a special area, okay? Here we also put a summary of student performance in academic content areas like reading, math, written language. So when we talk about present level of achievement, we're looking at sources of information which could be from state and district assessments, classroom assessments, rubrics, screeners. The bottom line is the information shared should establish what is called a baseline for developing annual goals. So we need to see data in the present level. So if the issue is reading, we need to know where the student is performing at what reading level or how fast they're reading, what their comprehension is, that type of thing. For preschoolers, if any of you have preschoolers, we want to talk about knowledge and skills such as early language development, communication, early literacy, cognition, and general knowledge. So there's also a section called present level of functional performance. And here we're supposed to summarize the student's functional performance. So that includes activities and non-academic skills needed for independence, access to instruction, and performance at school, in the home, in the community, for leisure time, or for post-secondary and lifelong learning. So they've got examples on this in this text box of daily living skills, social skills, what others, work play habits, social emotional behavior. So there's a number of items in there that they highlight. And again, for preschoolers, we're looking for information that includes the child's positive social emotional skills, the use of appropriate behaviors to meet their needs, and the acquisition and use of knowledge and skills. In this section, also, there's a section for the present level, the concerns of the parent and the family, and then there's a section for the concerns of the student. So this is an area where we as parents can identify what concerns we have about our child. So when at the meeting, parents will be asked if they have any concerns, and these concerns could include things about their students' reading, early language communication or early literacy skills, other academics. It might be social, emotional, or behavioral kinds of concerns. Or you could even talk about post-secondary or for their future, that you're worried about them graduating on time, okay? Could be a variety of things. And then the student has an opportunity to also share any concerns they have for their education. And sometimes when we talk about students providing that information, most of the time elementary children aren't necessarily the ones attending their IEP meetings. There may be other ways that you might obtain that information, but certainly middle school and high school students attend IEP meetings, and that might be an opportunity for them to talk about what are some of their concerns as well. So we've got a couple of things in here that are really, really light. But one thing we always have to note here is that understanding achievement means we have to understand what the standards are and what the expectations are of our children when they're in a certain grade. And so one of the things we use are the parent guides to student success, which is put forth by the National PTA. And they go by grade level, kindergarten all through high school. Each level talks about English, language arts, and math. And it's a really nice resource to identify what students could or should be learning at each grade level by the end of that grade level. And then we also have the Wisconsin Model Early Learning Standards for the little ones. So, at any rate, so that is step one. So it's all about gathering information and providing that in there. Jody.
I just wanted, can I add something about that? Are there anybody in here with middle schoolers or high schoolers? So when we get to that student question, it's great if you kind of prep them at home too. Like we as teachers will say, hey, we're gonna ask you what you think about your needs. If you get the chance to have a little talk with them about their IEP coming up, then they don't freeze up sometimes, you know, because it's all of us. They know all of us, but it's just nice sometimes to prep them, talk a little bit about it before the IEP meeting.
And that is a perfect segue for if you look in your blue parent record file folder and look behind evaluations. So look behind the evaluation report tab. And in here you're gonna find two handouts. One is the student snapshot, which is meant for parents to fill out in advance of an IEP meeting. So it's hard being at an IEP meeting and suddenly being asked, so what do you want to put in here, right? Jody just talked about prepping your student. We as parents have to prep ourselves as well. And so the student snapshot is meant for families to fill out. And you'll see we ask questions about personality, likes and dislikes. We ask about strengths and interest. We ask about reading interests, proud moments, challenges and difficulties. And then on the back side, we talk about, so what has worked to help your child in the past? And what are your long-term and short-term dreams for your child? Because we need to start dreaming as soon as they're little. We have dreams and hopes. And sharing that with the IEP team is a really great way to kind of help them understand what we hope for our child and what we see our child doing in the future. You can include other information in here as well as healthcare needs. Question 10, what are the 3 areas or skills you would like your child to work on during the next school year? Because we as parents are part of that IEP team, and if there are some goals we'd like to see our child work toward, let's write those down. What is the best way to communicate and share resources with your family? And then what types of things could the school do to help our family? So really nice questions. You don't have to answer them all, but I will tell you, if you look at the items in parentheses at the end of every question, that tells everyone where that information fits into the IEP conversation. So maybe some of you already write things up in advance, so you know how powerful and easier an IEP is if you do, because you get so emotionally tied in to what's going on that sometimes it's hard to remember what you were going to say. So the same goes for students. So that's why the My Student is set up for students to fill out this information in advance. They could send it in advance of the IEP meeting so everybody knows what's on their mind, or they could just bring it with them and read it. Or if they choose not to read it, they can just share it at that time, okay? I have had some families also have recorded or had their child do a PowerPoint or something on the phone, a video recording, because the child isn't comfortable talking in front of a group of adults. The same goes for a parent though too. Sometimes parents aren't comfortable talking in front of teachers, but sometimes sharing your information is a whole lot easier, okay? Any questions? So thank you for bringing that up, Jody.
It was not a plan.
It wasn't a plan, no, but
It was just natural.
that was really, really good because it's not easy. IEP meetings aren't easy, and we need to find a way to try to make them a little bit more manageable for us, okay? All right. So step 2. So now that we know all about the student and we've got all the information we need as far as where they're performing, both academically and functional performance, we now talk about, we identify why the student is not accessing, engaging, or progressing in general education. So the purpose of this particular step is to identify why a student has a disability and why the student may not be performing at grade level expectations. It really does pinpoint the specific student needs in order to help the team identify what the focus of those annual goals need to be. So, I have a short little video right here called Root Cause that kind of explains that whole process.
Years ago, the stone exterior was deteriorating at the Jefferson Memorial in Washington, D.C., a popular monument in the United States. Repairing the stone or painting over the worn areas was too expensive, so park rangers turned to root cause analysis and started asking why.
Why was the stone deteriorating?
High-powered sprayers were being used to wash the memorial every 2 weeks
Why were high-powered washings needed every 2 weeks?
because of bird droppings.
Asking why stopped because it seemed the cause was found. Workers put nets around the building, but they were unsightly, and the birds found ways around them. So it was back to the drawing board, or the 5 whys.
Why are there so many birds?
They come to feed on spiders.
Why are there so many spiders?
They feed on insects at night.
Why are there so many insects?
They're attracted by lights that shine on the memorial at night.
With a new cause found, questions stopped, and a plan was created to reduce the amount of time the memorial spent in the spotlight at night, and it worked. The insects were reduced by 90%, and with the root cause removed, the excessive cleaning was no longer needed. An unexpected benefit was a cost savings realized by using less electricity. This highlights how root cause analysis can involve trial and error, and how the 5 whys isn't always limited to exactly 5 questions. Read more about root cause analysis and the Jefferson Memorial story at the link below. Years ago, the stone exterior was deteriorating at
Okay. So I think it really exhibits it's a really good example of how you can keep asking the question why and trying to get down to really what is the root cause of why the student isn't making progress. And I think the statement that sometimes you try something and it doesn't work, so you go back to the drawing board and you say, so why isn't it working? Is it the instruction, or are we not working on the right goal? Okay? So examples of disability-related needs could include reading comprehension, reading fluency, reading decoding, math fluency, math calculation, written expression, post-secondary preparedness, organization, articulation, sensory things. There's a whole bunch of different things it could be. But it's really important that we identify those disability-related needs. So let's go back to the IEP forms, because now we've talked through the first 2 stages. So we talked about page 1, which is that present level. If you turn to page 2, the special factors, these 5 questions haven't changed, okay? So we'll just move on beyond that, but those have to be considered. So if you go to page 3, the top of page 3 where it says item E, effects of disability. So this is the area that we talk about for step 2, okay? Where we're asking the question, why does the student struggle in reading, or whatever the area is, and really trying to figure out what the skill is that we need to address, okay? And then item F, as you go to the bottom, you're gonna see a summary of the disability-related needs. So after that time, after you've talked about those, you'll notice at the bottom the numbers. And one of the things, when they changed the IEP forms, they wanted to make sure that when you identified a disability-related need, you put a number to it, and then you could link that number to a goal. Or link that number, that disability-related need, to maybe a service or support in the IEP, like an accommodation or something. So for instance, if the student had difficulty getting to class on time, and the student is in a wheelchair, okay? Why is the student having difficulty getting to class on time? Let's say he's a high school student. He has to navigate from one end of the building to the other in 3 minutes or 5 minutes, right? And in a wheelchair, it presents all sorts of challenges. So a disability-related need might be he needs to be able to get from one class to another before the next class starts. And so there may not be a goal written for that, but there may be an accommodation allowing him to leave early from class so he can go to his if he has to go to his locker, and then get to the next class before kids are let out into the hallway. Because if you're in a wheelchair and there's 1,000 kids passing at one time, it's really hard for a young man or a young woman in a wheelchair to get from point A to point B. So sometimes our disability-related needs might not have a goal linked to it. It might be an accommodation, okay? But wherever you have a disability-related need, you ought to be able to follow that through the rest of the IEP, okay? All right. So, step 3. Oh. So step 3 is developing IEP goals. Before we go to that, the one thing I mentioned earlier is at the bottom of page 3, right under the disability-related needs, you'll see item 2, family engagement. So remember I said our IEP forms actually have a question in there about family engagement, unlike any other state. And it says, how will school staff engage parents and families in the education of the student? And they give examples like sharing resources, communicating with parents and families, building upon family strengths, connecting parents and families to learning activities. So it might be a variety of things. So it may be specific to the needs of that family too. So it could be a wide variety of things. I will tell you, it should be more than progress reports on IEP goals sent home trimesterly or quarterly. It's supposed to be more than that, okay? It should be connecting families to resources, or maybe more regular communication about a particular item or other types of things, okay? All right, so let's go to step 3 now. So that's measurable annual goals. So goals will, remember, address a disability-related need. So that includes a skill set that the team determines the student must develop. It provides a baseline. So now our IEP goals should reflect the baseline data that was shared in the present level. So it defines how the student is currently performing. It should state an expectation. So in 1 year from now, where do we believe the student will be? And the annual goals may have short-term or objectives or benchmarks, but that's only, it's only required if the student is taking an alternative assessment, okay, or alternative achievement standards. So that hasn't changed really very much. It's still the same kind of process. Progress reporting, you'll see that there. We also want to identify how the goal will be measured, and how and when parents will be informed of progress. And normally, progress on IEP goals is when students typically get their report cards. It's typically on the same schedule. However, there are sometimes goals that require more frequent IEP progress reporting. And most frequently, what I see when progress reporting may occur more frequently might be if a student has a behavioral goal, and if there's a real need to address that more frequently. But otherwise, most goals is, if you're on a trimester basis, you're gonna get reports 3 times a year. If you're quarterly, it's 4 times a year, okay? All right, so that's step 3. Step 4 is special education services, and aligning those services and supports. So what the student needs to access general or special education, instructional services, related services, supplementary aids and services, program modifications and supports for school personnel. So this is known as the summary. So if you turn to the page that it's the program summary, this is what we're talking about. On this page, we are going to identify, first and foremost, you'll notice the IEP form used to start with special education. It now starts with supplementary aids and services. So the reason why we talk about accommodations and supplementary aids and services first is DPI would like to see students first receiving accommodations in the regular ed classroom first before being pulled out for special education, specially designed instruction, okay? Because there are lots of things that can be done in the regular ed classroom. If you remember the video we saw with the text to speech, and if kids have laptops or Chromebooks and things like that, there are sometimes all sorts of technology types of things that open doors for our kids. Our kids need to learn how to use those things. Sometimes that is a struggle, but we want to talk about supplementary aids and supports first. And here you'll see, you describe it, the frequency, location, duration, and then you'll notice on the far right, it addresses which goals, because goals are now numbered, and then it addresses what disability-related needs. So the numbers go across, and you as a parent should be able to follow from disability-related need, where it's addressed in the goals, and then where it's addressed in the supplementary aids and services. So after tonight, you might want to go home and take a look at your son or daughter's IEP and just follow where it goes. That's half the battle I've found in trying to figure this all out. Special education and specially designed instruction is section B. So that's like speech and language, or specially designed instruction in reading or math. Item C is related services that are needed to benefit from special education. So that may be transportation, occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech and language, things like that, nursing. And then item D, our staff sometimes need training or support, but so that may be written in here, but also time to collaborate with regular ed and special ed. So sometimes you'll see 10 minutes a week with special ed and regular ed, so that they have time to talk about the student and how they're doing and what's coming up and that type of thing, okay? So that's our supplementary, that's our summary page. And then step 4 also talks about the general education environment and physical education environment. So you have to identify here whether the student will participate full-time with non-disabled peers in general ed. The IEP will then summarize when and why the student will participate. One of the other handouts that I gave you today, actually 2 of them, that I just want to point out that are really helpful for this section of the IEP is you'll see a 2-sided one-pager, or a 2-pager on both sides, however you want to define it, that says special education services. This is a handout that kind of gives examples of each one of those areas. So the supplementary aids and services and supports, the specially designed instruction, related services, and program modifications and supports. So sometimes it's hard for parents to know what kinds of things would go in these areas. So DPI and the development of this presentation, kind of put this together so we as parents kind of have an idea of what goes in here. Okay, so that's number one. And then number two, DPI puts together a bulletin to school districts as guidance around all sorts of different topics. And so I've provided you a DPI bulletin update. It's an information update from October of 2010, but then it was updated in 2011. And it's about describing special education, related services, supplementary aids and services, and program modifications and supports. So this particular item actually works really well with this section of the IEP. And what it does, it's a Q&A, but it goes through and it gives you examples of different ways of writing different types of services and supports into the IEP. So I provide this to you as information that as you're looking at your son and daughter's IEP, it's really important that we as parents understand what services and supports our child is getting. And I don't know about you, I'm not a teacher. I had to learn this all through going through IEPs. And I wish I would have had something like this way back when. So, because it's hard to understand and learn what's going on. And this helps us make sure we're understanding what we're reading and that what is being provided, we know what it looks like. Okay? All right. So that's step 4. And then step 5, that's where we talk about analyzing progress. So, and this is where, as we've developed the goals, school teams or teachers and staff will do informal and formal assessments along the way to determine whether or not our child is making progress. We also talk about at this point whether or not our child will participate in assessments. So that's like the forward exam, the ACT suite of exams if you have a high school student, things like that. So we have 2 handouts here that are not provided tonight, but when you get the PowerPoint, you can click on here. And these are really nice worksheets that can help you prepare for an IEP and to think and to know what are some of the questions you could ask in learning more about your child's IEP program. Okay. This slide just talks about the fact that transition in the state of Wisconsin starts at age 14. So anybody who has a student in middle school or high school, this is really important. We are also doing another presentation in April on transition, so we'll go a little bit more deeply into this. But just to know that the transition, when children are 14 and older, we still follow the same IEP process. We do put together another plan, so you have an IEP and now you have a PTP, a post-secondary transition plan. And what the one linkage between the PTP and the IEP is at least one IEP goal should be linked to transition, okay? So if you think about reading, a reading goal is going to link to any transition goal in the future, because if you're thinking about college, career, or living in the community, the ability to read and navigate and to be successful, a reading goal will link.
Sorry.
That's okay. All right, and then here, let's talk about getting ready. So if this is your first IEP meeting, talk with others who understand the IEP process. I think that's entertaining to me, because I have always found that no matter what IEP meeting is, if it's my first, my 10th, my 20th, I've always found it helpful to talk to another parent and bounce ideas, okay? So I would highly recommend that all of you do that. Find somebody to chat with and just talk about what you're seeing, what you're thinking, helping another parent kind of frame some questions and kind of get things organized is really, really helpful, I find. There's an IEP checklist that's linked here. It's from Wisconsin Facets, and it's on their website. So if you're familiar with Wisconsin Facets, great. If you're not, right behind the general information tab, I included a Wisconsin Facets training calendar. So, because I believe parents need to gain information, and the training calendar is a calendar of webinars that Wisconsin Facets puts on for free. It's for educators, it's for parents, it's for agency reps, it doesn't matter, it can be for anyone. They're usually an hour in length, although now they have a mini IEP series that they just started in January, so they're like 30 minutes. And they're almost always from noon to 1 or noon to 12:30. And if you aren't available at the time that it's going, still register, because they'll send you the link to the recording and then you can watch it later. If you're interested in seeing any of the past ones, they've got on their website, they have a list of other webinars, so you can request by putting in your email and stuff like that, and they'll send you the link. So I have that in here, but even if you go out to their website, or when you get this PowerPoint, click on the IEP checklist, and it talks about things you can do before an IEP meeting, during an IEP meeting, and after an IEP meeting. Okay? The next one is the student snapshot and my snapshot. So we looked at that in the evaluation section. Remember, we pulled out those input forms. So we talked about that. Always talk with your child. Find out from your child how they feel things are going, okay? Don't drill them, just kind of talk. Just kind of find out from them how things are going if you haven't tapped into that. Always review the present IEP. Taking a look at it, it's okay to go and request another copy of it if you need the teacher to send it to you, or I don't know if you guys have it available on your data system, if parents can access it automatically, but ask your teacher for a copy. Always write down a list of questions that you want to ask, and excuse me, have positive conversations with your child's teachers before the IEP meeting, okay? Sometimes that's hard, okay? Sometimes things are difficult, but the more positive we can be, the easier the conversations are when things get hard, okay? So building that relationship is really important. Oh, this did not show up well. So there are plenty of resources out here that the PowerPoint's available. I encourage you to link and connect with those. And then we're at the questions section. So thank you so much.